Okay, everyone, welcome back. It is 11:20, and for those of you that are regular attendees of Webinar Wednesday, you know we start right on time. I am Diane Michael with Beyond the Boardroom, and I'm so happy to be here with you this morning for the third presentation with my friend and CAM partner, Lindsay Lombardi with Coastal Living Association Management and Dominion Management. If this is your first time with us, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're returning back, we so appreciate you and for helping us to grow this program. Our goal at Beyond the Boardroom is to educate board members and CAMs in an easy way at your desk while you're traveling on your phone. We know how important education is, and we know how important CE credits are, and that's exactly why we decided to launch this free program. We started on the fourth Wednesday of each month and have already grown to the second and fourth Wednesdays, as well as some other educational opportunities that we throw in, like legal updates and board certifications. So in the chat, I put in the next webinar Wednesday that's happening on February 25th, where we will have continuing education units for HR, insurance, and OPP. So if those are still on your list of things that you need, be planning on February 25th to attend. And we know that getting email newsletters sometimes can be overwhelming. We know that you get a lot, but ours are important because they're changing all the time. We get new presenters, we get schedule changes, we get new courses that are approved by DBPR. So if we get something, we want to get it out to you as fast as possible. So be sure not to ignore our weekly emails that we send out. And please save us as safe senders so you don't miss out on any of the updates that we have. And of course, we would be so pleased and thankful to have you let the fellow board members, your board members know, and your fellow CAMs know. I'd love to show where you all are coming in from today. If you could put into the chat where you are coming in from so our next presenters can see. I see that someone had, Mark, thank you for putting it in there. Ladies, you can see as everyone goes and just lets you know where they're coming in from. We appreciate that. Lindsay, do you just want to give a quick overview of submission before I introduce the ladies?
Yes, sorry, I had to sneeze. So we are going to put all the information in the chat at the end of this course, just like with our course this morning. We will have you put in, you'll go to our page, you'll put in your first name, last name, middle name, CAM license, and the name of the course and the code word that we provide at the end. So please make sure that you are paying attention at the end of the course. You do have to save for the entire course to get credit. So we will send all that information at the end.
And we have a treat for you today. It's going to be a treat for us as well. We haven't had a panel yet, so we're excited to introduce Liz, Ruth, and Kathy with Vote HOA Now, the industry experts in electronic voting. They provide full service management of online voting for directors, elections, amendment votes, and any other membership votes and surveys. Vote HOA Now helps communities achieve quorum while saving both time and money. With years of experience, the Vote HOA Now has been a prominent presence in the industry, hosting online webinars like today and presentations, participating in CAI trade shows nationwide, and contributing to roundtable discussions, all to enhance electronic voting education and support for the industry. I've had the pleasure to talk with Kathy, and I'm just so impressed with her and her services. And we're excited to have you ladies with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the great introduction. Appreciate it. My name is Liz. I am a former community manager. I was a portfolio manager for 13 years here in Portland, Oregon. And we have Kathy Slight, who has over 20 years of experience in the industry, 10 as an executive portfolio manager here in Portland, Oregon. And then we also have Ruth and Goldsby, who has 10 years of experience as well with Vote HOA now and was also a former community manager on the larger scale communities. And we are excited to be here, and we hope you take something from our presentation today, navigating the choices for electronic voting. So, of course, I have to give a legal disclaimer. While the information we're going to share with you today is meant for you to learn more about electronic voting, how to get started, but of course, it's not intended to give you legal advice. We are not attorneys, but hopefully, we give you some information you can take back to your other board members or folks in your office. And then the outline today, we're going to cover a legal overview. Ruth's going to kick us off with that for authority for electronic voting. And then different service provider options. We'll go through what options are out there for you. And then we'll do a deep dive into e-voting resolution and rules. How do you get started? What do we recommend? And then the funnest part is some different misconceptions and myths about electronic voting. And we'll try and tackle those. And we will be monitoring the chat. If you have questions, we'll do our best to get those answered. We'll kind of give ourselves a little break and pause throughout. So with that, I'm going to kick it off to Ruth.
Thank you, Liz. So as she mentioned, we are not attorneys, but we have done a little research for you on the statutes to allow electronic voting because there's a lot of them in Florida. So initially, an overview of the authority. Depending if you're in a condominium or a HOA or a co-op, you'll have a different guiding statute. They are pretty much similar, the same, except for that the condominium statute has a few add-ons. So here we can see what those statutes are. The condo statute 718, the co-op 719, HOA 720, and specifically I've labeled the part of the statute that talks about electronic voting. The couple extra add-ons for Florida, specifically in the administrative code, some additional items for elections and electronic voting. When you are looking at those statutes, there's other statutes to consider, not just about electronic voting or your meeting, but also look for your notice of meeting because that's going to be very important to make sure you're following that. And then an owner date of record. So that is who's eligible to get notice and who's eligible to vote. When we talk about e-voting, this line at the bottom, there's a new statute about e-voting does not mean by email. There's a different guideline if you're not going to do e-voting that you may have to use email set up for that. So we're going to just briefly touch on what's in these statutes. Language that you would look for when you're reading these statutes, look for words of electronic, online. So it may be electronic ballot, electronic vote, or online ballot, online vote. Again, look for that electronic notice language. Specifically find the code that talks about that the ballots, the e-ballots and e-votes count towards quorum for your meetings. Those are one of my favorite things. And that you'll notice that there's nowhere listed that it says you need a proxy with the electronic vote or the electronic ballot. So you don't have to worry about those confusing proxies anymore when you're doing the electronic. Also, you'll find a reference that the ballots, the e-ballots, count towards a reconvene if needed. Make sure you put that on the top of your ballot so that it's stated very clearly that if you don't make quorum and you need to have a reconvene, that those votes still hold. So a little more deeper dive into what's actually written in those statutes. There we go. So the association, and I'm referencing the condo statute because like I said, they are all very similar. So, but I'm just referencing the condo statute in this case. So the association may conduct elections and other unit owner votes through an internet-based online voting system if the owner consents. Now here's something that is a little different from HOAs versus condos. In a condo, the owner can consent electronically. So typically that consent happens right when you're registering to vote and voting all at the same time. Now you may have to get your certificates in order initially to see who is actually going to be the email that is going to be authorized to receive the invites to vote. And you'll handle that in your office initially. So a few things that the statute provides that you must follow certain guidelines of what a voting system can and can't do. So it needs to authenticate identity of the individual voting. It needs to protect the secrecy requirement because that is still going to be needed to be secret. Even if you're doing electronic, you need a method to confirm delivery. And you'll see then the statute goes on the next screen to continue to say that it has to transmit a voting receipt to the owner showing that the vote was not altered in transit. Again, talking a lot about secrecy with authenticating their identity, separating their authentication, that kind of thing. So just giving you a nice little brief overview. The next part of the statute, as I mentioned, my favorite talks about that the e-votes count towards quorum for your meeting. Not going to read that whole paragraph, but know that since it's in the state statute, you're good to go for your meeting that you're counting all those e-votes. So a lot less paper counting. There's a little more in the statute, a little more about the resolution that you have to create. So first step, and Kathy's going to dive into this a little bit as part of our deep dive, that you have to create a resolution. So if the board authorizes electronic voting or online voting, you have to, this is something new, you have to honor the owner's request to vote in subsequent elections. So keep that in mind. If you offer it once, you have to keep offering it. And your owners are going to go that way anyway. They want it. Everyone wants that ease of use of voting from anywhere, anytime. You have to give them the opportunity to receive the notice of the opportunity to vote through the e-voting system. And you have to establish reasonable procedures and deadlines. Kathy's going to get into all of that kind of stuff. What some things you should put in your resolution.
What's it all about?
Yeah. Now, something that did change recently, there was part of the law about the notice. You have to provide written notice of the meeting that you're going to discuss that resolution 14 days before the meeting. They removed that requirement. Still have your meeting, that kind of stuff, but that written notice of 14 days before to discuss the resolution was changed. So I think this might be the last little page about the resolution, some new stuff, or about the electronic voting with the resolution. So this is new. It's confusing to some people, but they have now differentiated that electronic voting is different from voting through an online system if you're submitting via email, if you want to submit via email. So basically, it's that the association, if you're adopting electronic voting, you're good. You can use electronic. You can still do paper proxies if needed. You can vote at the meeting. But if you decide not to adopt electronic voting, that the association has to designate an email address separate from other email addresses for just the receipts of electronically submitted ballots. So a lot to consider there. Somebody then has to be in charge of getting those emails with those ballots. And as a part of that, when they are submitting those e-ballots, owners have to be told that they are no longer going to be complying with the rules of secrecy that have to be adopted for all your other votes. So a lot of people might not want that. Consider that you're telling them that I'm going to know that you voted and how you voted when we tabulate this. And then it goes on to talk about what's got to be on that ballot if they do submit it via email. So lots of stuff to consider there that's a little bit new. Waiving that secrecy choice is something that's critical.
Yeah.
I lied. There is one more screen about the statute. I forgot. Yes. So the condo code, the admin rule specifically calls out a few things I wanted to touch on very briefly is for elections that you have to provide a minimum of 14 days of voting. So that gives your owners enough time to receive those votes, consider the items that are on there, review ballots, candidate submissions, things like that. You have to list your candidates in alphabetical order by last name. You cannot say the word incumbent. So you can't have, the candidate's name, comma, incumbent. Of course, the candidate in their biography that they provide to you, they may say that they were a former board member or the former treasurer or something like that. That's fine. You don't have write-ins on the e-ballot. And of course, as we've discussed, like probably 3 times I've said it already, it's got to be set up as a secret election, a secret ballot. Next little segment is the owner date of record. If you're not establishing or don't have one established in your bylaws, a little description of when your owner date of record is. If you're confused about that, ask your legal counsel. All right.
It really comes more into play when we're talking about elections because
Yes.
it really is a transfer of ownership. If I were to buy my home and the election had been open 7 days already, I would not be eligible to vote in that election. It would be the next one because the owner date of record would be the day that voting starts. We don't see it a lot with amendments, but there are some occasions where we do see an owner date of record for changes of ownership, depending on how long you're running the amendment.
So Kathy's favorite part of the whole electronic voting.
No more proxies. Yeah.
Yes.
You still have to make proxies available, upon, request. Mary probably might always give her proxy to Tom because he works on her sink or does little maintenance things for her, and she feels obligated and she feels like she wants to continue that. She has other choices. So make those proxies available upon request. Don't send everyone one, or you'll have yourself a proxy pile nightmare. Especially if you're adopting electronic voting. The whole goal is really to get away from those paper products, but you're still going to have a few.
Mhm.
But we
So
still like
for,
saying it. No more
yes.
proxies.
One of the biggest questions we get is how do we know that we can do this? It's not discussed in our governing documents. So we would like to touch base back on this from the early days when you got into the community association management or as a board member, recall the hierarchy of documents. So federal, state, then you get down to your municipality, then you get into your HOA or condo plat or a plan, declaration, articles, bylaws. So that state statute that we just went through very briefly will supersede what's written in your governing documents for the most part, unless there's some very unusual language. And again, you can confirm that with your association's legal counsel. So just remember that state trumps the
Yeah.
association.
And,
And the
and
state
and the
allows for it.
verbiage would typically be you shall not or you may not
Right.
use any electronic means. But we haven't seen that for quite a while. I
Yeah.
mean, those are documents that were created in the 60s, but they're out there, 50s and
Well,
60s, they're
I mean,
out there, yes.
most documents created in those days had no concept of electronic or things like that. So
We
they're just
didn't have the
silent.
facsimile
Yeah.
machine yet.
Yeah.
That was our
So
first
Kathy,
electronic means.
so now that we know that we can use electronic voting, what do we see for trends coming up here that help to shape the reason for needing electronic voting?
Mhm.
What's our
Yeah.
future?
What is our future? These are so fun. We love looking at stats. We wouldn't be an online company if we didn't every once in a while. So it's interesting to see. I won't read all these, but look at this 60,000 to 65,000 community association managers. We got your back. We know exactly what you're going through. And that number, I'm sure, has grown significantly even since we pulled this report. 2,500,000 community association elected members. Look at that. I mean, they
Yeah.
are outweigh the managers by far. It's
And
because there's, 3-person boards. That's
right.
it.
And then you have those volunteer hours performed by the board and your committee members, the time that you dedicate, to your association. And then, I mean, look at that 3.4 billion estimated value of time provided by homeowner board and committee members. So again, thank you for your service. That's a lot of time that you're putting into it. We know managers, we know that these votes and your annual elections really are just annual. They're one time a year, they're one occurrence. You have many other things you're juggling day to day in your association business. And e-voting and voting is just one thing, one of them.
Mhm. I
And
think
then
it's
some,
interesting in
yeah.
that last little paragraph where
Mhm.
it says the volunteer hours are 33.49 $33.49 an hour is what your time is worth
Oh,
when
I
you're
see that.
volunteering.
Okay, yeah.
Just a little tiny thing.
Yes. And then some eco stats, switching 1,000 people from paper ballots to electronic voting can save over 25 pounds of paper. I mean, that's big in the scheme of things. And, of course, it has the lowest carbon footprint per vote casted compared to snail mail or mail-in paper ballots and in-person voting. And overall, it just has a lower environmental impact, but increases that participation across the board. We just had an association tell us they joined 3 years ago. At first, they were getting 20% participation, which is great with paper and in-person voting. But after 3 years of incorporating a second option of electronic voting, they're now getting 80% of their community involved. And you're just reaching more and more as you're traveling and things. I mean, we're not always home, as we know.
So we do hear a lot like, well, our community's older, they're not going to take to this. They don't have technology. So we have some stats about that. This is according to Pew Research as of November 2024. So it's increased, I'm sure, because it's been a year since these. But at that time, 96% of American adults were online. And you can see back in 2021, when COVID started, it was only 93%. So that increases continuously. Um, I myself know that I'm online every day. You're all probably online every day. You're here online. And we know the younger you get, the more online you are, right? But so the concern is with that older group. So Pew Research in their studies found that older owners, seniors, ages 80 and up at 44% using the internet. I myself know my parents, my father, 91 years old, he's on all the time. They are doing things, they are looking at their financials, they're talking to their grandchildren, they are booking airfare, things like that. At the very minimum, they're taking, FaceTime calls from grandkids and things. So, and
Right.
they
And
have,
if they don't know how, they
yeah,
ask.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
they have younger people to help them around
Yeah.
them. And
And
as
they
we
are
said,
trying. They may not always do it right
yeah.
the first time.
And
I
as we said,
remember when my dad learned how to text.
yeah. As we said, that this is not a one size fits all. You're still going to have some that may want a paper proxy, or you'll still have some that will come to the meeting and vote in person. And that's great. So you're just extending another option. If you think about all those winter visitors that, they come for the summer only, and then they hightail, or for the winter only, and then hightail it back for the summer up somewhere up north, they might not be around for in-person meetings. So you're trying to reach more and more people. And then, of course, that group, that millennials, Gen Y group, at 72 million people, they are now our largest living generation, and they are online constantly. They started in school. So, they've never been without that technology of going online. And so, and the youngest group now, that Gen Z, and now, of course, as Kathy says, she loves to say we've got the new generations, Gen A, coming up again. But Gen Z is making up 4% of home buyers. So they're hitting their late teens and early 20s, and they're buying properties, they're buying condos, that kind of thing. So you got to keep them in mind too.
Hmm.
All right, so
Yeah.
now we're going
And
to
if
do
you
our first overview of different service provider options. Kathy?
Yep. Thank you, Ruth. So we know we've looked at our state statute, we found our authority, we've talked to the board, everybody's excited about adopting this new service. So where do we go? What do we look at? So we like to talk about the service level choices. We think that is really important for you to know. There are a few. There's the full service provider, self-service portal, or management company software. Now, a full service provider, of course, is going to free your manager up to work on other projects. That's what you contracted them to do, to create budgets, to deal with compliance issues, to take those phone calls, that personal touch for your community and whatnot. I know for a fact, if you are in the middle of election season, not just talking about one community, you might have 10 who are getting ready to have their elections anytime, between, I always call it the 60-day window of craziness, where you have all of your elections and annual meetings. So it just really frees the manager up to still be a manager. And, just like your insurance provider, your attorney, anyone that you work with, of course, is just letting those professionals do what they do best. And believe me, a third party separation completely removes the board, the manager, and the committees from that day-to-day setup during an election, the monitoring, the collection, all the paper ballots and whatnot. They're all handled in a professional manner. So those full service providers are the highest security level. Now, some of our biggest competition, and it's not always great, of course, is the self-service portal or the management company software. Now, what we found and what we've heard is that managers, maybe even board members, have to learn a new system. And what we'll say is that, one year your manager might be fantastic. They know a lot about technology, or your board member or committee member, but what happens when they are not voted on the board? They move out of the community, or there is a portfolio change. And you managers out there know portfolios are changing all the time. So you might get a manager who's not as comfortable with technology, and you'll have to be looking for a full service provider after that anyway. But you're going to find that the level is more professional. Now, self-service and management company software, more work for the manager. Everyone's involved in the process, does not provide that third party separation. So you can't blame it on someone else. It's all up to you. You have to remember every step that you took, every entry that you made, every ballot that you added, every name, everything. So keep track of it if you're going to. It is definitely more risk for the association. And, if you get a vote challenged or you have a question that you can't answer, you're going to find yourself in a position that you don't like to be. If you're going to go this way, make sure that you're setting yourself a good timeline and rule for requests, that you have enough time to look at that data and figure out how you're going to answer that professionally. And sometimes you may have to get your attorney involved if you've used one of these self-service or management softwares. Same is true with the email voting. If you are adopting it's not on this list, but it's out there now, the email voting, if you are adopting that process for your community. And gosh, if I had under 10 homes, I might be looking at it too. It is going to save the association money if you have deferred maintenance and other projects, that you need to funnel your money to. But it does create more risk. And then if you're using, you have to use some kind of platform. All right. So remember and ask the important question: what are you doing with my email addresses and the information that I'm loading into this system? We like you to keep in mind that free means that all of your information is the product, and someone in the background is collecting it, and they're using it for the purpose of marketing. Sometimes we've got a online voting company that's a print shop too, or doing other things, and they want to market to all of those residents in that area and see if they'd like to have their invitations printed for their 50th wedding anniversary or something. So we see a lot of that, and we hear a lot of that, which is the reason a lot of those self-service turn to a full service provider. Now, I think we've talked about, all vendors are not the same. Attorneys, insurance companies, find the one that you like, that you're comfortable with, that is serving your community at the level that you expect. Always with the full service provider, you're going to get that full service. But with the self-service and whatnot, you are the provider. So make sure. Now, we always say work with an e-voting partner that specializes in the community association industry. We are growing. As we showed the stats, there's a lot of people out there volunteering their time, a lot of managers. But it is nice if they know the industry, they've been to a meeting, they understand what you go through day to day, and they understand the makeup of boards. Boards don't make decisions quickly. It usually takes 2 or 3 meetings to talk about it and, make decisions and bring something new on and form a committee or whatever's going on. So it's nice that your vendor knows exactly how community associations are run and managed.
Yeah,
If
and
they have
I would just say, work with someone that understands your state statute specifics and that is going to do it correctly the first time around, so you're not having to, redo your meeting, and make sure you get the reports you need if your vote is secret, and and all of those things in factor. Just start early and start planning now.
Yes, yeah. Well, I always say time is on our side. That's one of my favorite sayings. Okay, so let's dive in deeper. I think we're getting close to the end, so we want to get everything in front of you. E-voting resolutions. According to the state statutes now, you must pass one and share it with your owners. So be as concise as you can, looking at your state statute, gaining where you're getting your authority. The types of meetings. Is it going to be for in-person meetings? What are we going to do for online only? Are we going to have a hybrid? How's that going to look? Think about those situations before you get into them. Timing, a time frame. We always say back it up. Pick your date of your meeting and back it up all the way through. But include enough time for that call for candidates period. Since there are no write-ins, it's going to be your best friend. You're going to get the most opportunity to look at all candidates that are interested. And of course, 10 to 20 days for the notice and 15 days before the annual meeting. Candidate submissions are fun electronically. You can include bios, pictures, photos, little short videos, resumes, all kinds of things. They're easily accessible on an electronic platform. So, what should be in your resolution we just talked about, but who's going to be involved in the setup? The manager, the board, the committee member. We're typically working with the manager. They are definitely a neutral party with no ownership in the association. This could also be a trusted individual in your community, an election chair or something. A lot of you might be self-serve and you are looking to that one person to be that trusted individual. They have to be available to answer questions. Of course, there's going to be questions from the owners. There's going to be questions from the e-voting provider. And it's good to have a person that has the ability to look at that information, to pull the owner data, to look at the ballots and make sure everything is spelled correctly and all the information provided is good. They're going to be looking at those. They're going to be providing all the approvals. There isn't any voting company out there that doesn't want you to review the ballot, make sure everything's spelled correctly, and before they provide their
I
approvals.
think the most important part on this slide, just to reiterate, is making sure that whoever is that contact, and you need to write it into your resolution, needs to be neutral so that their spouse is not running, somebody in their household is not running or on the board already campaigning. They can't go out campaigning for people. They truly, truly have to be neutral. So if you have a management company, it's usually your manager. But as Kathy mentioned, if you're self-managed, then make sure that that person is a neutral person. Don't want to have people coming up with questions on that.
Right. And you may already have someone that has played that role for you year after
Or an
year.
inspector of elections. We've worked with inspectors
Yeah.
of elections that have been in
Mhm.
that role as well.
Right.
All right, more
So
rules and
just a few
details.
more details. I think one more page of the details. These are silly things, but every vote that you run is different. Make sure you know the quorum that is needed. What are the other items that are going to be included or excluded? The ballot will be secret. Positions, what are the lengths? What are the terms? The owners want to know. And sometimes managers, you're getting an association, you don't know what the terms are. Sometimes the board doesn't even know what the terms are, that they've came into, so make sure that you have some time to find out those answers to those questions. We talked a little bit about it, the owner date of record. Are we doing a paper mailing? Are we offering proxies? Those types of things. And it's good to put those in your resolution or your rule so that owners know exactly what to expect. Also, if you're offering electronic voting, paper voting, proxies, which vote will prevail? In most cases, it is the electronic vote is final, even if you receive a paper ballot or a proxy after that. But at the first time, you're going to have a few questions, and if you have a delinquency process or a closing process, that you go through before you end the vote or we end the vote, then, we'll need to know what that is and who those individuals are. We always want everybody to walk into the meeting with a big fat check and pay off all of their fines and everything and receive a ballot, but we know that doesn't happen. So if they voted electronically, we'll be removing their vote from the system. Announcing the results. Are we going to announce the candidate tallies or just the winners? What happens if we have a tie vote? We talked about this yesterday out here in the Northwest. We even have documents to say we're going to flip a coin, or something funny. But make sure that you know exactly what you're going to do, because you are going to run up against a tie vote, and it's good to think about it before you get there. And of course, after every voting experience, look at your rule, look at your resolution, make sure that you're incorporating any new ideas and removing some of those things that were obstacles that prevented you from moving forward. So update it, get another copy out to your owners so they know what to expect too. And they know that you're making changes for the betterment of all of the owners in the community.
All right, Ruth, shall we deep dive into misconceptions and myths?
Yes, there are so
Yeah.
many misconceptions and myths.
There
So
are.
I'm sure there's some that we're not going to touch on, but here's that first one. Older owners want paper. Not true. It's just not.
No.
Most systems are accessible for older owners. Make sure when you're viewing and looking for an e-voting provider, that it is easy to read, that the system is easy to follow and has buttons for them to step through the process. You don't want to have to explain to them how to vote. As long as they can read and follow the instructions that are clear, they'll have no problem. We see it all the time. Somebody wants to put together a 15-page presentation showing owners how to vote, and that just makes it seem confusing and hard, and they're not even going to try. So make sure your vendor has a very smooth, easy process.
And
Kathy,
then lack of all owner.
yeah.
Oh, what was that, Kathy?
No, I was just going to say, Kathy, what about the owner emails?
Yeah.
But Liz, you take it.
Yeah. Liz, what
Yeah,
about
lack
them?
of lack of all owner email addresses. Well, let's start. Let's start now. Let's send communication out to our members. Let's ask them for their primary email address in advance. Get it updated. Let's do this semi-annually or annually. Let's just keep a constant updated list. But you have to start somewhere. So, emails are better than no emails.
And Kathy, I've already
And you
mentioned
will have a
about,
better list
yes,
after your first vote than you've ever had. So keep
yeah,
that list updated all the time. And like I said earlier, don't forget to ask these vendors what they're doing with your emails and your information. How are they safeguarding it? The answer should be that they are using it for the purposes of this vote that you've asked them to run only and nothing else. And it remains your property that you're loaning to them to run the vote. And then Ruth, what do we do? Nominations from the floor.
as Kathy had already mentioned, that call for candidates process is going to be your best friend. So get those nominations done in advance of your meeting and put them on the ballot. You may still have people who want to nominate from the floor, especially if you don't have enough candidates for the positions that are open. But as former managers, we know you never see anybody at the meeting from a floor nomination, because you need to vet that they're even eligible to be on the board. We've had people nominate from the floor and then find out they're not even listed on the deed of the property. So, but you can take those nominations from the floor, say, yes, thank you for submitting your interest. And, the board's going to review it. And if you're eligible, you may be seated at the next board meeting. And then the board at their meeting seats that person who had nominated if they're eligible. So really makes that
lots of good
much
reasons
faster.
for that. Yeah, lots of good reasons to do it that way. And, we'll never turn away anyone who raises their hand. If they raise their hand, they want to be on a committee, they want to be on the board, they have an interest in serving your community, and you should just lasso them in and do something with them. Yeah.
So what about hybrid meetings? Again, spell it all out, work it. Don't discount using that technology. If you're using like a Zoom meeting, have a Zoom and in person, but determine okay, if somebody is coming into that meeting and paper is being turned in, if you're doing a virtual only meeting, nobody can turn in a paper ballot because you're virtual. How do you turn that in? Here you go in Zoom. So make sure you spell that out, that if you're not collecting paper ballots, because you are doing a virtual meeting only, that they need to be submitted in advance in the e-voting system, or a proxy needs to be sent in advance. Make sure you spell that out in your resolution, but definitely it's a myth that you can't do both. You can do both. Or you can do
Yeah.
just one.
Just don't send everything to them. Allow
Yeah.
the owners to make their
Yeah.
choice. What if someone votes electronic and paper? This is the biggest thing. We all know that an electronic vote is instant. So you're going to receive it. I mean, some people even forget that they voted electronically.
Yeah.
Really, we get a lot of questions.
And you're like,
Just make sure that you say which ballot will prevail. And in most cases, you're going to get lucky and it's going to be the electronic
right.
ballot that
And
would
your
prevail.
electronic vote is going to have a date, time, and stamp on it, which is more specific than a paper being received that the front office gets it. And then by the time you get it, it might even be a day or two later before you see it on your desk, that kind of thing. So just
Yeah.
know that and just spell that out again.
Mhm.
Right.
But
And
something
make
What if
sure
no
that
one
your
comes forward, Liz?
Yeah, and well, touching on the last point, make sure that your vendor or whomever you are working with or whatever system you're working with provides those detailed reports of who voted electronically
Mhm.
and who did not. So if you are accepting paper, you can make sure they didn't already vote.
So we've
And
got
then
some more on here that I don't think we have enough time to discuss them
yeah,
all.
yeah.
But
But we'll pop it up while we're closing.
yes, but for those who are concerned about a signature on the ballot or envelope because your vote is required to be secret, make sure your e-voting company has a way that voters are doing electronic signature. There's guidelines at the federal level that have been adopted from the Florida state as well. So make sure that they're following that. But yes, that's available in your e-voting. Don't think it's not. And then of course, everyone talks about that it's so expensive to do e-voting and things like that. But again, consider cost of your meeting locations, your price of reconvene meetings, the cost of mailers, notices, envelopes, the cost of your volunteers having to go knock door to door to get quorum, to get people to come to a meeting. That all has costs. Might not be
I
dollar
always thought
cost.
that was the manager that had to do that. I
Yeah.
always
Well,
said,
we
why was it the manager had to go door to door and knocking for these things? We don't
at
do
a
that anymore.
at a meeting, we would get anyone who was willing to come go knock. So the end result of all of this, of getting through your the myths and breaking through those misconceptions, is you want a trusted system, right? You want a partner in this e-voting process. You want to look for something that's easy for owners to vote, that ballots aren't going to get miscounted, that's going to authenticate those results. As Kathy just said, they get tabulated instantly. Liz mentioned earlier, you're going to get a much higher participation rate and achieve quorum even before your meeting. So you've reliably achieved quorum. You can have your meeting. As Kathy loves to talk about, when you have a duly elected board,
Elected
so you
board.
don't have to just keep appointing with normal rotation of terms and no more
Yeah.
door knocking. So, and of
No
course,
more door
everyone looks like a
knocking.
superhero. So no more confusing proxies. Everyone looks great. The board has a duly elected, you have a duly elected board. Your annual meeting goes off with a hitch and it's clear and concise.
It sounds like a meeting I want to go to.
Yeah.
All right, we have time for questions if anybody has any questions.
Perfect, ladies. That was amazing. So I have a few questions here that we had submitted. So I will read them off to you and take your time answering them, and then we'll move through them. If a homeowner has an outstanding lawsuit with the HOA or COA, they are suing the association, can they run for the board of directors? That's probably a legal
I was
question.
going to say that's a
I
question for your association's
yeah.
legal counsel.
Yeah.
I think it
So
is too. I mean, we've seen it in documents where there are some things that disqualify a person from running on the board, but I would agree that it would be a question for legal.
100%. You want to make sure that whatever you tell them is something that your attorney can defend should you get sued over it one way or another.
Exactly.
Okay, here's another question. How do online votes hold up legally if challenged?
So you just make sure your e-voting partner can have a process for recount, retabulation if necessary, and to provide all the documentation back to the attorney who's going to present that to a judge, that kind of thing. So just make sure
Yeah.
that you're working with a reputable company that has their
Mhm.
processes in place.
And kind
Yeah.
of along
And,
this, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, and in most cases, an electronic voting report is better than a paper ballot, and the owner has a receipt of exactly how they voted. So it really makes it very easy
Yeah.
for those votes to be looked at and authenticated, even over a paper ballot.
And
That can
again,
be
that's
misunderstood by three
right.
different people.
That's that electronic signature. You have to make sure that that's
Mhm.
very important that you're gathering that, and that's showing that who actually registered and voted. So, sometimes you turn in a paper ballot, you can't really be sure that somebody didn't just write something on the outside, that kind of thing. So it's that same kind of process, just in an electronic form.
Yeah, and that kind of goes in line with the next question was what safeguards prevent duplicate voting or ballot tampering?
Mhm.
So yeah,
Mhm.
typically each property gets loaded into the system with a unique identifier of some sort that gets provided to that property owner. So that identifier is not provided to anybody else. It shouldn't be given to prior board members. It shouldn't even be given to current board members. So that chain of custody gets kept throughout, and that person has to register with that code. So, and then once that code is used, it can't be used again. So it can only be one person per property with that unique code. And again, make sure your voting company gathers that information of who voted, who registered and voted, and they can then review it. It's especially important if there's a trust or an LLC and you don't necessarily have that name. You may have to research the assessor website to see who the owner of that trust is to make sure that that's the person who voted.
Perfect. And then I guess a
Well,
question
and I
I
think
have, and you may have answered it, was along the same lines, and it probably has to do with who you choose to use. But I assume that at some point, like once you've submitted your vote, you would get an email or something that would pop up to show that your vote was counted. So homeowners can be
Absolutely.
sure that,
Mhm.
that their vote registered.
Yes. And that's
Yeah,
actually part of the Florida state
it's in the
statute.
state statute.
Yes, that you
Yeah.
have to have a receipt sent to them. So make sure that when you're looking at an e-voting company, that they say that they provide that receipt. We do pop up an on-screen confirmation and send that receipt. So you get it everywhere.
Yeah. And
Okay,
it's
and
really
there's
important if they want to ask questions about their vote. The most professional thing you could do is ask to see their receipt so you can confirm with your e-voting professional that, they're seeing the same thing on their end.
Right.
perfect. Um, our board has approved electronic voting. Can I now contact a vendor to implement? I
Yes.
would say
I
yes.
think so.
Yes.
There's
You
our
guys have
email right
implemented.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Get
obviously you
get
have to,
an estimate.
And
Yes.
it's
yeah, you
as
have to
Kathy
send
mentioned.
out.
Right. As Kathy mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different e-voting companies out there. There's a lot in other countries as well. So when you are doing that research, make sure we think, keeping within the US and keeping with a provider that is specific to this industry, former managers that understand state statutes and understand what the board needs to be the results, understands what the community manager needs to help them with their processes. So look for those couple of things that we had mentioned on that previous slide for sure when you're looking.
Okay, and I have a lot of people asking of where will I find a list of voting companies? You're talking to some of them right now. So Vote HOA Now, they are a provider of this service. So their information, which is info at votehoanow.com, which is on the screen right now, you can contact them and get some information from them. Obviously, most associations are going to want to contact more than one person potentially, but I mean, I
Mhm.
think you can see from this presentation, they know what they're doing and probably a great place to start if you're looking for a way to move forward. And they can probably help you if your community is a little bit different than the standard. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say, there we go. Liz just popped it up. Come to our website. Um, Liz, maybe put it to everybody. Oh, there,
Got
Callahan
it in there.
did it. Yeah, come to our
Yeah,
website. We don't hold back on our knowledge. There's so much on our website information. There's an FAQ. There's a little video showing how we do things. Talks about our security levels. So much on there. Come learn.
and
and then,
for
sorry, there
those
was
For
I'd say
those
there's
that,
one more question that I think you probably answered earlier, but I do just want to have you respond to it. And that was what ADA or accessibility considerations apply? So
Yeah,
just reiterate
we
on
do
that.
get that question off and on. And well, let's talk about two different things. Typically the owner has those already loaded on their computer. So they're using whatever system or product that they need to read or listen or receive that information. So everything on ours can be translated as well. We ask the client to provide that translation language. So there's a couple of different ways that we can look at those things, but most of our owners who need ADA already have those systems loaded on their computers or a trusted individual to read their mail to them. Wouldn't that be nice to have
Right.
someone to help you with that?
And for our system, it's not an app that they have to download. It's web-based, so it's available 24/7 if they have a, iPhone, tablet, old, Mac computer, PC, their laptop, they can access it. So as long as they have a system that can get email and has internet availability, they can access.
I
No
just want
special
Perfect.
to
tools.
say, I just want to say with for CAMs and board members that are present with us right now, anyone that has used one of the Beyond the Boardroom Association allies, we've heard nothing but positive responses. When we work with association allies like Vote HOA Now, we talk to them ahead of time. We learn about their business. And one of the great things that they do that we all are applauding is that they provide continuing education on a regular basis, like today. And it's not just this course, they have multiple courses in multiple states. And that shows what their commitment to the industry is. It also shows that the state regulators are saying, you've got our stamp of approval on these people, on what they're doing for a business, for the communities, for HOAs and COAs. So I highly personally recommend them. They cannot, obviously promote themselves too much here because of the education component, but I will. People that really put in the time and energy to educate CAMs and board members for free really should always be part of the bid process in your daily and monthly budgeting. I will also say, ladies, are you good if somebody was to contact you to do a via Zoom with the board members so that they can better understand what your services are? Because I think sometimes, CAMs may not be able to really get all the questions answered. So wouldn't it be nice just to partner the board members with you?
Funny you should mention that. We all provide twice a month. We have demo webinars already scheduled
It's
that
awesome.
boards, committees, managers, anyone who wants to come and learn and see what we do, see how our system works, see what the voting portal platform looks like for an owner to vote, see what the final reports look like, things like that. They can come, they can view it all, talk through the process with us, ask all of their questions. And
I
we have one
love that.
tomorrow. We have one
Wonderful.
tomorrow.
Yeah. And
So
it is a
guys,
really
any
great,
CAMs that are watching, send that link
yeah,
over to their board members so that they can.
yeah.
And bookmark the page. We always tell everyone to bookmark
Yes.
our page for registration, CAMs. If you believe in education and you plan on, being part of Beyond the Boardroom, bookmark these different links that we put out in chat. Very good, ladies. Thank you.
You're
Do we have any
welcome.
other questions before we go into how to get credit for this course? Okay, Lindsay, ladies, we can take it from here and get with you